Everyone, welcome back. Welcome in to Ruthless Honest Truth. My name is Josephine Connectley. I'm a clinical hypnotist, and today we have Rosannah Jones with us. Rosannah and me, we go way back. She was one of the earliest people to trust in my hypnotherapeutic offerings. We worked together on our shared experience of premenstrual dysphoric disorder. So Rosannah is here with us today. And my intention with this episode is I really want to be introducing to everyone who engages with this podcast, the community that we're weaving. I really want to be highlighting power players who I've met and worked with and who've inspired and expanded me. Because I feel like in this day and age of so much panic and a lot of kind of mixed up perceptions towards health and what's possible with health, and especially in terms of the way that we are feeling in the world. I want to be championing and highlighting people who can really support and help you, who are creating and platforming perspectives that aren't limiting and aren't constraining, and instead really dive deep into the realms of possibility. So, Rosannah is here today. Rosannah, if it's all right with you, I'm going to invite you to introduce yourself through that lens of like, yeah, this is what I'm really owning. This is how I want to be known to the world at this point in time.
I love that. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me on, Josephine. I feel so blessed to be here. I'm Rosannah. I'm a menstrual cycle and womb coach. I really focus on the emotional, energetic side of menstrual cycle work. I look at people's life through the holistic lens of menstrual cycles. I've been working with people one on one through group programs, through workshops and events over the past couple of years. And what I've really realized is that what was missing for me is that there's like no radical conversations going on around how and I say radical because anything that's radical is a departure from the mainstream. The mainstream narrative around a lot of menstrual health is that there's either no support, there's lacking services, the only options are drugs, surgery, it's long-term issues that you face and with no cure or no healing. And I just really didn't agree with that. And having been through my own experiences of like multiple health challenges with PMDD, cancer, like really severe period pain, all these different things, I have been on my own path of healing and recovery, and I know what's possible. It feels completely wrong to deny the rest of the world and anyone out there who's looking for these options that opportunity, because you can totally shift things in your life. You can heal and you can get to your body is designed to heal. I feel like working with your natural cycle is one of the most powerful things you can do. It completely changed my life. Yeah, I'm just all about spreading that message to people, bringing them into my world so that one of my clients once described me as she said like I feel like you open portals. Working with you is like opening a portal. It's personal transformation because you're energetically, emotionally shifting things in your life that have been suppressed, that have been unprocessed. You're turning them into your power. And it's a path to lead you forward and to live a much better, much more fulfilling, much more present life, which is not what I was living before. And a huge focus of my work has been on PMDD, premenstrual dysphoric disorder. It's something I experienced for years, and I have created a program that is all about addressing that and rewriting the narrative.
Right, let's get into it. So I always forget to do this bit. I remember once I was at like a group training and someone turned to me and they were like, this PMDD you talk about on Instagram every day, what is that? And I was like, oh, how do you not know what this is? So I'd love to know through your lens, your approach, how would you define PMDD? My next question really wants to be, A, how do you define PMDD from your perspective? And then for people who haven't had that perception shift yet, how did you find when you realize you're experiencing PMDD, how did you make that move forwards into, right, thank you GP for the birth control and SSRIs not working for me? How was that experience for you?
So I think PMDD is it's a couple of weeks leading up to your period. It's where all hell happens, basically. Like it can feel like the most destructive thing in your life because you might have been living life quite normally, quite happily for like the first couple of weeks of the month or the first couple of weeks of your cycle. And then all of a sudden something shifts, something changes. It's like a switch has been flipped and you feel like you go into self-destruct mode. I always describe it as like pressing the self-destruct button because that's what I was doing for so many years. Completely oblivious, like unaware that that this was a repeating, recurring pattern. And I think that's the case for a lot of people. But I think because there are more mainstream conversations around PMDD now, people are at least able to identify the symptoms and realize that it kind of comes under this umbrella term. So people will describe it as like a more severe version of PMS, which to some extent is true, but it is so there's sort of the rage. I'd say it's for me, it was definitely characterized by severe rage, anger, wanting to isolate, wanting to hide away, self-harm, like suicidal ideation, like things like that. And it would vary, like sometimes it was much more heightened than other times. But I was going through this endless loop of cycles that felt like that. And for years I just felt completely out of control and it would really affect my relationships. I had like cripplingly low self-worth and self-esteem. And it almost felt like everything in my life that had ever sort of gone wrong or every mistake I'd ever made or anything that I was I suppose unprocessed would come to the surface in that couple of weeks before my bleed and it would be so intense and so aggressive that I couldn't cope. So I probably turned to like drinking a lot. I went out a lot, but then I'd like crash and have these like awful episodes. And it was only really for me personally, when I like got diagnosed with hormone positive breast cancer in my late 20s, that I realized that the PMDD and that pattern with my menstrual cycle was all like these were all the underlying and sort of symptoms that were happening at the same time, and it was all part of the same problem, which was that I had a lot of suppressed emotions, and PMDD, was felt like a threat to my life, to be honest, for like a really long time. Yeah.
Yes. I think it's always me getting emotion. It's always so fascinating when we do take the time to deep dive into the experience of PMDD, because I really want to make it clear to our audience that for both of us, we were in hell. And
Mm,
it's wild hearing you talk about it and me remembering my copy paste experience in our own ways, because that's not our lives anymore, but it was for
mhm,
such a long time. And I just want to share this anecdote. I saw a friend who I went to secondary school with like 2 days ago. We know the worst versions of one another, which is really nice. It's not held over each other, but I always feel very seen when I'm with her. And she just turns to me and goes, "Josie, do you remember you were such a bitch?" And I'm like, okay, already loving this, but like, when exactly? She's like, "Yeah, literally every month you just turn on us. You decide that we weren't our friends. You'd go and try and be friends with other people that didn't like you. And like, you just come into the forum room and you'd be miserable." And I was like, I don't really remember this, but also I feel so validated right now. What was I doing? And she was like, "You just would show up like a different person and you wouldn't talk to anyone. And we all would turn to each other and be like," she's like, "I'm sorry to say it now, but like, we would just dread it." And almost
mhm,
then as a joke was like, and funny that we didn't see that there was a pattern there, kind of inferring to now we recognize the PMDD. But I always feel that's one of the most insidious parts of it, is because we don't know that's what's happening. And especially like as young
mhm.
women, you're not allowed to express your emotions, and we feel them very intensely. So what do? We internalize all of it.
Well, someone reflecting that back to you, like you said, it's those spikes of almost like it feels like two personalities, doesn't it? And I think that's where there's also like a lot of confusion, misdiagnosis, like avoidance of looking at the menstrual cycle or at other stuff in people's lives, where because that's probably where loads of BPD, like bipolar disorder or emotionally unstable personality disorder, like those labels have been thrown around because that's how it sort of presents, especially when you're unaware of it. And the last thing, like often that a male, especially like a male doctor, is going to do is to go and look, is to ask you about your menstrual cycle. So, Yeah, but I really relate to that. I think I probably had similar presentations without being aware of it, yeah.
Oh, I kinda wanna touch on that as well. I think the realm that we exist within is so emotional and very, like, mind, body, being, like, we're not
Mm,
in the centralized system at all, and yet the language through which PMDD is a psychiatric term, BPD, psychiatric term. So how do you navigate the benefit of the language, but also the realm it's from is pathologizing, limiting. You've got PMDD, bye. We don't need to know why. Whereas the realm we're in, it's like, okay. So how do you navigate that in your practice
mm.
with your clients?
That's such a good question. It's definitely been a journey, like a bit of a roller coaster on of trying to navigate that because I have those feelings where I want to use PMDD in my communication with people because it's become the sort of catch-all phrase or term or diagnosis that people resonate with because they can people are starting to, especially if they've experienced it, identify with what that means and what the symptoms are and what that experience is. So for me, it's important to speak to as many people as possible. So if that means using that term, that's what I'm going to use. But on the others, like the sort of flip side of it, yeah, I definitely feel like it's pathologizing women's bodies and people who menstruate. It's definitely that I liken it almost to new hysteria because it does feel like it's that it's that
Gripping my
form
neck.
of yeah, it's that form of control and obsession and fascination with women's bodies and almost saying that, you know, because we have a menstrual cycle, we're crazy, we're like unhinged, with this, with that, and but there's no cure, there's nothing we can do apart from I just find it incredible, like in the worst way possible, that hysterectomy, surgery, extreme medication and drugs and stuff is the only way sometimes people are being told they can support themselves when they experience PMDD. And I suppose in my work, like how I navigate it is that I always say I come from a very natural healing, natural health perspective, and I'm not looking at the mind and body as separate as Western medicine does. I look at everything as being interlinked and whole, and I look at mind body energy. That's not as sort of woo woo as it sounds, because I know a lot of people will hear that and maybe think straight away like, "Oh, that doesn't resonate with me." Really what I'm looking at is emotions and energy and like you were saying, suppression of things, and that comes out, I think, in my communication with people. I'm saying, "Here, okay, here's this label that you identify with, whether you've got an official diagnosis or not, it doesn't matter to me, but you identify
Real.
with it." Yeah. You identify with having these experiences every month repeatedly or you know, fairly often in your cycle, and you know your life sucks because of it, like it feels really, it's a struggle and it doesn't have to be that way. So here I am, like, so you can go to the doctor and you can get a diagnosis, but I can guarantee the only options they're going to give you, and they'll be fairly limited, and they'll tell you there's just ways to manage and cope. But what I'm saying is that if you come into my world, we can take a radical departure from that mainstream narrative, and we can rewrite the narrative around PMDD. You can reclaim your relationship with your menstrual cycle, which in practical terms looks like understanding what your body is doing every month, what the inner phases and seasons of your cycle look like, and how you can work with your cycle rather than against it to bring your body back into way more balance. And through that is getting to the more emotional root causes of things, of stuff that you've suppressed, and what is PMDD actually trying to do for you in a way that perhaps it's been trying to protect you. That's like the thing I often come back to, is that's what it was like for me. And I know we've spoken a bit about this before. It's PMDD, or those symptoms, they're appearing for a reason. They have a purpose. They're not just there randomly. My work is really unpicking that and looking at why have those presented in the first place, and how can we sort of like unravel and get to the root of it. So I feel like that's how I navigate it in my world, and it's just making it clear that you can identify as having PMDD, you have had those experiences validating that, but it doesn't have to be forever.
What I really want to touch on is that we've all noticed that now there is more awareness of premenstrual dysphoric. What we're being called is a disorder. Where you and me are like, this is a protective reaction. But I notice that when I see PMDD being talked about on TikTok right now, there's like a huge thing like, if you experience PMDD, just take an antihistamine, sertrazine hydrochloride. And when I read this, I'm like, this is good that we're talking about this, but we're still
Mhm.
all the time, I'm like, "This isn't deep enough." People are
Mhm.
still promoting coping management. I think I wanna highlight how people at the moment are like, "Yeah, it's histamine, it's a histamine problem." But in your practice, how would you really approach that? Someone's coming to you and they're being like, "Look, I've tried the histamines, I'm trying" what else do people try? Like rhodolia, "I've taken these various herbs, but, like, it's still happening. What do you think I could do now?"
I definitely see that, and I said, like, all the sort of as well, and they've as in, like, they've tried supplements. Even in the sort of natural alternative space, there's other pathways with PMDD, but they might, like you said, they might still just be about managing, masking, coping, and
Yeah.
I really feel like I I'm big on people taking, like, radical responsibility, and what I mean by that, I keep using the word radical because it does
Love
it
it.
does feel right in this conversation, but I I had to put in work to get to this point, and that's not to say that there's not systems and structures in the world that make it harder for some people than others, like, 100% it does, and, there's, like, I as women and people with menstrual cycles, we go through there's so much oppression there, there's generational stuff. I feel like it's quite big to explain, but you just can't get there alone with any other sort of coping mechanism or masking thing because it is just surface level, and you have to be willing to go into the shadows, to go into the darkness, but in a really supportive space. And I feel like that's what I create for people, is to look at the things that have happened in your life, the trauma, let's say, how you reacted, how you responded to it. What we do is I do a lot of energy work as well. I do a lot of kind of guided energy transmissions and meditation, and I really carve out a supportive space for people, and I feel like in that space people start to see big shifts because some of this is just your stuff, but some of this is bigger, that it's outside in the world, or it's stuff that's happened over generations through families. And yeah, you can get to a place where it's so much easier, and it gets to be so much easier, but I feel like I've definitely noticed that a lot of people just want fixing, and they just want healing, and they just want a cure instantly. And my work's never really been about that. It's about that gradual process, that collaboration, that working together. And I think that's why I've shifted more to working in group programs and group work, because I feel like in those spaces, that's where we all, like, we share the load of doing that work in a as a collective, and it's not so individual and so dependent on someone coming to you and saying, like, "Oh, I'll prescribe you this, and if you take, like, 3 doses of this, you'll be better." Like, no, that's, like, the old model, like, the old paradigm, I guess. Like, that just doesn't work, and this is, to me, this is how we move forward.
I love this. And that point you said there of like, you can't get there alone. And I really want to
Mm.
validate. I think I really like that you've highlighted as well. There is a lot of work that goes into this. Like when we've got complicated presenting health challenges, you try and mask and further suppress. But it's like you say, it's in going into the experiences and allowing ourselves that space to explore. Where did this come from? Why do I feel so uncomfortable in
Mm.
myself? Why am I suppressed? Why am I so uncomfortable being held and supported that my body has to, as a result, be like, right, the week before your period, when everything's lowered, then that's the time to let it all out. And I'd love to explore further with you how you found that that group approach to supporting people currently experiencing PMDD, how that group approach is such an unlock.
Yeah, I love that so much. I delivered my first cohort of my group program, Protecting My Deepest Desires, last November, which I was very lucky to have you be a part of, and it was amazing.
Thanks for
And
having me.
it was so good, and it was honestly, like, it was such a sort of a dream course in the sense that it just all came together very, very naturally. And it's because I think coming from such a authentic place of I've been on this journey myself, like I know which stumbling blocks I hit and where to avoid them and what helped me. And really like what I went through personally. So I worked with you and that really changed things for me. But I wouldn't have been able to benefit from that work if I hadn't put more of the work in myself afterwards. And what
Yeah.
that looked like longer term was going into I decided to train to be a menstrual cycle coach, really off the back of working with you. I felt like on that course, like I was in it for about 6 or 7 months, and coming together in a community of women, all learning together, all sharing and processing together as well, because we'd all had our you don't get pulled into that work or drawn to that work if you haven't been through something big yourself. So
Yeah.
it was incredibly um cathartic and supportive, but just like really it felt very balanced. It didn't feel like one person, even though we were training with Lisa DeYoung, who runs the Menstrual Coaching Academy, and she's amazing. It felt like even though Lisa was facilitating the course, the work was very shared amongst us, and we had like sort of splinter groups where we go off into to do things. And I sort of wanted to create the same effect through my own programs. For my PMDD program, it's quite intimate. It's for like up to 6 people. And I feel like in that space, people come with their own individual stories and their own unique experiences of PMDD, but there's shared things in that that everyone's experienced. And through that being just allowed to be sort of seen and heard, because PMDD can be such a secretive, private something you can feel so ashamed of and so like guilty for experiencing.
Mm.
It's so attached to, like, low self-worth and low self-esteem and not feeling good enough, that actually to really open up that space and really support and validate each other, but not in a way of, like, just trauma dumping on each other, more in a
Mm.
way of because you've come into this program, you too share the view and share the optimism that there's another way, that there's another path, and I think that is incredibly empowering, an incredibly empowering space to be in, because you're not going into a space where it's like, "I just need to vent and dump all this stuff." There's elements of sharing what you've been through, but it's in a way of, like of being in the present, but also looking towards the future of how can we shift things, and the results that I saw from doing that collective work, doing that program last November were just incredible. Like, someone who took part in my course, she said, you know, "I hope every person who menstruates does this program," because she said it helped her to emerge a new woman. And I've had other people message me who said that after they've taken the course, and it's only, bear in mind it's only 5 weeks, they've had like their first pain-free period, or a few months later they've started to feel like everything in their cycle is starting to balance out and they've not had those PMDD symptoms creep up again. So it's not always like instant reward after that. Sometimes it might be, but within a few cycles, if you continue with the learnings and the practice and the integration of what we learn in those 5 weeks and what we explore together, you feel so like it's just the possibilities are endless. It's amazing.
It's so powerful that you are giving people a new possibility, that new perspective. Because I think that was a huge moment for me. Until I knew what PMDD was, I thought I was broken and I would be forever. I thought I was
Mm,
bipolar, chemical imbalance, and my life will just always be reactive, just victim 101. Just like I am a victim of my circumstances. The circumstances are generated by me. My menstrual cycle is the enemy. My brain doesn't work. White flag, like I'm done. Realizing that PMDD existed through Instagram, and I think anyone listening to this is the same. Like, we're curious people. We're not
mm,
the person to be like, PMDD is a thing. I identify now as PMDD, the end. What is this? What can I do? Let's explore. For me, that shift of what is possible, that was one of the biggest catalysts ever of like, hold
mhm,
on a minute, my period isn't evil. I'm not evil. And now I get to learn a whole lot more and
mhm,
connect to the truth of what it means to be within my body. It's so wild. I'm so grateful for you reflecting all of this, Rosanna. I'm used to it now. I'm used to not experiencing PMDD. But like you
mhm,
say, the journey the journeys that we've been on are colossal.
Yeah.
And while the centralized system is like, right, you've got a problem, let's just cover that up, go and deal with it. How,
Mm.
like, we have learned and understood so much more as a result. I think I used to refer to PMDD as like through the fire. It's like alchemizing. You
Mm.
can get through this. And guess what? You get to change every aspect of the way you experience life. And that's a gift. That's
Mm.
so brilliant. So I'm getting really into this.
I was gonna say, your story really, your journey, from what I could see when I was that person on Instagram and on social media, like, looking for answers and feeling like there's no way that this is it, that I just have to put up with this forever. But again, similar to you, I felt broken. I felt like that was it, like, there's no real, like, solution. When I first found your videos and saw what you were talking about, and you were honestly like one of the first and only people I could see who was telling a different story, and that to me was so attractive. I was like, I need to be in this person's space because it's yeah, it takes a lot of bravery and courage, I think, to confidently step away from that mainstream narrative because there's so much fear there. It's so fear-based, everything, it's almost like you're stuck in that way of thinking if you only prescribe to, like, what you've been told. But if you can see that there's an alternative, and even if you don't know how that alternative is gonna come about or what's possible, but you just have the optimism or the curiosity to look, you'll find so much, like what with the work both of us are doing. And I really have you to thank for for a huge part of my journey and experience because yeah, without you and the work we did together, like, I wouldn't be here, definitely.
Cry. It's almost hard to process, isn't it? And there's almost a side note of anyone being like, well, I couldn't tell my story on the internet. My early work, pure chaos. But the message is there. And I think that's
Mm.
what's so important. This is possible. And what also want to highlight, Rosanna, is that earlier you mentioned when I'm working with clients, I look at the experiences that align with PMDD. You didn't say imbalances, you didn't say what's broken, what's lacking, experiences. And I think that's a key part of that perspective shift is really, like you said, allowing ourselves the space to acknowledge what we have moved through. PMDD is scary. It's not nice. It's very volatile. And this is an experience that we've had. There are other options. We've covered your realization that PMDD existed, how that you first went to seek help, the work that we did together, you then moving into, right, I want to take this further. Like there's a flame here and I want to nurture this flame. I want to fuel this fire. So going into your own training, into the menstrual coaching. So what did you notice was missing from the PMDD care options that you'd found? And then how did that inform really diving into like, I want to be a group facilitator. I want to lead this in a group way.
Things we've said already about the PMDD, you know, options that they're pretty limited. That was and I to be honest, if I'm being completely, like, truthful, I come from a family where we've always preferred natural health options. My mum, my grandma, like, that lineage, like, it's really interesting, but that's just the way it's always been, and we've always kept that quite to ourselves out of fear because we know a lot of people, like, disagree and don't think like that. So I was always like, even in my cancer treatment, that's why I started looking at other options. I didn't have like chemotherapy or radiotherapy and things like that. I went a different way. Even through taking that different path with cancer and with PMDD, I realized that I mainly focused on the physical body at first, focused on exercise, on like detoxing, eating whole foods, and all of that I think was important at the time, but I probably did that to the absolute extreme where I was reliant on that and supplements. And yeah, and I ended up with amenorrhea, not ovulating and then not having a period. But actually my PMDD intensified in that time. It got so much worse, probably because my hormones were still trying to do their thing and cycle, but I wasn't having that release that my bleed was giving me. So it was like this continual rage and intensity of PMDD through these 9 months of having amenorrhea. And I realized then, I was like, right, so it's so much deeper than all the physical stuff. And I felt like even though I was doing all that stuff to counter cancer, I realized cancer is an incredibly emotional illness as well. So it's like this is a very like roundabout way of answering your question. But I realized that all these things were so linked. What I realized was missing, what the gap was, I was like, is this deeper emotional work? Is this deeper emotional, like mind, body, energy connection? And I feel like what I do in my work is like I allow people to be vulnerable, to share, but to process in a way that isn't then just like talk therapy. It isn't, and that's what I was trying to explain with that group container. It's this shared pathway that we're on, and you might cry in a session or you might release in a slightly different way. I feel like in that space, the load becomes so much lighter. It's not being in a therapy setting where you're just offloading PMDD experiences and information to someone and they're kind of sat there opposite you, not really giving much back. Because I think that is equally just as traumatizing. It's really getting to the root of that stuff. And, unless I was doing more intense work with someone over a longer period of time, I'm not the one telling them what that is. They're there realizing it for themselves through the process of doing that. And that's where the power is, because I remember a herbalist that I like really look up to. We spoke about PMDD, having both experienced it. And I remember her saying to me, she said, I think women and people who experience PMDD are incredibly powerful. They just don't realize it. And PMDD is like the suppression of their power, but once you learn what it's trying to do for you, it becomes expression. And like to picture me ever doing a podcast, being on social media, ever having courses. I was so shy, Josephine. Like, I was like the shyest person. Um,
Really?
yeah, I was incredibly shy, like incredibly introverted. So this is what it's so hard to then show people fully what that transition, that shift is like. But I feel like this is so much bigger than PMDD. Like PMDD might be what we deal with, but this is your whole expression, it's your whole being, it's your whole life. Yeah. And actually my catchphrase for my work is that I guide you back to your womb, your cycle, your body, and yourself, because I feel like those are the threads that we weave. It's empowerment through all of that.
So we've got your cycle, your womb, your body, and yourself. And that's so powerful because your cycle, so many people feel fearful of their cycle. And with all of this, maybe could have remembered to say this earlier. We're not here being like, why didn't you know this sooner? There's so much compassion here because we don't know what we don't know. But once we do have that awareness, now we got power. Now we got choice. So that's so brilliant. Your cycle, your womb. How many people feel disconnected from their wombs? But what have you noticed? This is that space of celebration of like, how much do you notice your life has shifted since reconnecting to your cycle, your womb, and your body?
Mm. Oh, so much. Like I wouldn't have had the confidence to quit my old job. So I was in like I suppose a corporate 9 to 5 for 5.5 years, and that was probably a huge part of what was making me sick, because I wasn't doing anything that I really wanted to do, and I had all these dreams and desires to be more artistic, to be more creative, to and I knew what that looked like. I didn't know that I would end up becoming a menstrual cycle coach. I honestly do feel like we come here with a purpose or multiple purposes, and through doing all of this work, coming back to my body, my cycle, myself, I was able to regulate. And not saying that I always have a regulated nervous system, because that's not what it's about. As in, I was able to just listen to my body, to tune into my body, to tune into my other senses, like my intuition. I became way more spiritual after doing all this work. But like I could feel and sense things that I've been so cut off from and disconnected from before, because I was only living from like the shoulders up. So what was going on below my shoulders was a mystery to me. Like I felt like that was someone else's body and I didn't know how to relate to it. And I'd say I'm still on the journey. I think there's like layers and layers of all of this, but I feel so much more connected to my body, to and my your womb is a really creative, energetic space within your body, and it's no wonder it is, because we can birth life from this space. the darkness comes light. Like, you plant a seed, something grows. Like, it's we have that ability as women and people with wombs. Like, it's incredible. But that applies to creativity, and I feel like you can really tell the difference between someone who's tapped into that part of themselves and someone who isn't, because they have so many less sort of guards or walls up. They're just fully expressing, fully allowing themselves to be in the world, and not just presenting a very one-sided version, or live in this sort of muted existence of, "Oh, I need to just be this person in a box who does this 9 to 5, doesn't have any joy or pleasure from doing any other things." And I just feel like I'm this multi-passionate person. I'm finally allowing myself to be the expression of that, rather than trying to like, for me, conformity is like the worst possible thing. I feel like that's generally what makes a lot of people sick, is having to conform to expectations, to standards, to rules and regulations and rigidity within society. And actually freeing yourself from that of conditioning is a huge part of this work too, because you just feel so much more alive on the other side of it.
Yeah. Well, as I asked the question, I was, oh, maybe I should highlight it's not what you've noticed externally shifting, it's internally, but you, of course,
Yeah.
naturally gone there anyway. And someone was saying the other day, they were like, I work with really high level people, they're millionaires, but I don't think they're successful because they're not free. They're not free to be themselves. They've got all the stuff in the world, but they're miserable. And
Mhm.
this is slightly tangential loop. Every time you and me connect, we are totally different people. And I
Mhm.
love that. And I think
Mhm.
it is that thread of being so now connected to our womb spaces and possibility that, like, now when we link up, it's like, right, what's happening in your world? And we're like, well, there's been some struggle, some strife, but also we're totally different people every time because we're
Mm.
following that internal journey, creating more space, allowing more structure that works for us, that naturally the outside world is able to now be shifting. Like, life's definitely more interesting now. I always say this.
Yeah.
I enjoy life much more now knowing that I can be responsible. And I'd love to know how you feel about this. But for me, once I'd realized that I had really shifted PMDD, all of a sudden I was like, right, well, what else is possible? Then being labeled with what's recognized as ADHD and autism, that felt like a much lighter load because I was coming into it with that mindset of, what is this? What can I do? Yes, I can accept myself within this experience, but this is very hard and I want to make it easier. And it's these same principles of working with the body, taking space for our emotions, that then these challenges that we are finding ourselves coming up against, we're moving through it.
Mm.
It's wild. Within the group program with your clients, I would like to know some of the breakthroughs that other people have had. Because, of course, good for us for finding our way. But what have you found with your clients that they're now reflecting back to you, having been given these tools, the frameworks, but also the perspective and the space to express in that group container?
So interesting, because there's a lot there, and I see it in you see it in very different ways for different people. Like I said, like, for some people, it's that they've never ever felt connected to their menstrual cycle. It's been something that they've feared, that they've hated, that I see personally that people have a lot of internalized shame and stigma against being a bleeding woman or person. Like, menstruation is not seen as something to love, and I feel like actually a lot of what I do in my work is about embracing menstruation, and really seeing how all the layers of, sort of, I suppose, like, patriarchal negative messaging around our bodies has fed into that, and has then become, like, internalized within us. So I see a lot of people who are able to say for the first time, they're like, I actually look forward to my bleed. I'd say that's like the most common thing that I get from feedback from people, is like, I look forward to my period, I look forward to bleeding, and they could have never said that before. And a lot of people who say, I now, like, love myself, or I feel like I can accept myself, they might still be on this journey of doing that, but they can feel kindness and compassion towards themselves in every season of their cycle and every phase of their period, which is basically every chapter of your life, rather than there's only 2 weeks of every month where they feel okay or they can cope or like life's better. It's their awareness shifts. I'd say that's like one of the biggest things. But um, I had someone who was pregnant take my last course, and she said, like, after her pregnancy that she'd experienced PMDD before that, but she said that, and she wanted to take the course in terms of knowing how to work with her cycle after pregnancy, and having had her cycle return, like, after giving birth, she was like, "It's been so much better than I ever anticipated or imagined," and it's those moments, like, just make everything, because that's someone, it's such a huge part of our lives. We spend years and years, whether you're on hormonal birth control or not, like, your body's still always trying to cycle, and there's just so much work there to be done. But I think the biggest takeaways for me is when people say that they learn to love that part of themselves, because I'm like, if you learn to love that part of yourself that has been so socially shamed and dismissed, that is a huge achievement, because you experience your body completely differently. Just don't attach as much negativity or as much judgment or things like that towards yourself. And yeah, I think it frees you up to just experience a lot more.
Love the realm of menstruality so much.
It's so cool, honestly. I sometimes I'm like, am I too obsessed with this? But no, I don't think so. It's just there's so many ways you can go with it. And
Because how many of us, we have awful experiences of menstrual cycles, and then you start learning about it. Let's strip it back. Most people say with diabetes, do not then become diabetes coaches. But so many of us have the experience of horrendous periods, horrendous ovulation, and everything within that realm. We then start learning about it. And then it's like, I don't know about you, but it didn't really feel like a choice when I was doing my menstrual cycle coaching with the Red School. I was like, I just have to be here. I literally was emailing,
mm,
I need you to let me in. I'm working with these people. I need them to have these resources. And they were just like, come on in. Like,
yeah.
there's so many of us who are just like, I need to learn more. This isn't a want, a need. It doesn't feel like a luxury. We've got to get this out there.
Mm.
It's wild.
What you said about it being a calling and it not really being a choice, that's exactly how I felt. Like, I couldn't afford to do the course I did, when I
It's
first
a
signed up
theme.
for it. Yeah, but I managed to get in, like, I managed to make it work, and it just shows you that those doors will open when it's something that's how powerful this work really is. And I feel like, yeah, it is a huge reclamation of something that's been so ignored for so long, and within that are so many possibilities. And I love working in this space. Like, I think you come up against a lot of hurdles, a lot of challenges,
Yeah,
because it's still
definitely.
it's still quite new for people, isn't it? For a lot of people, but and especially the angles we take on things. But there'll be a day soon where I already feel like it's changing, it's shifting, it's becoming more open.
Because I think when I first entered the realm, it was, as anything is, the more extreme realm of like womb awakening, womb priestess. I live in Bali. Don't get me wrong, love that. In my brain, I was like, let me get some royal codes clothing. It's in my drawer,
Yeah.
and let's do this. And I do really like, you and we're the people kind of hoarding this piece of like being like, love this, but also let's
Mm,
bring that into reality. Most of us cannot disappear off to Bali, but we can be present with our bodies. There's a whole host of knowledge held within us, which again, I think
mm,
for women is huge, because systematically we've all been disconnected from the truth of our bodies, where there is so much wealth and wisdom there. We're moving away from it being this kind of like retreat
mm,
thing into really the menstrual cycle, like you say. You know, people say to me often, oh, yeah, like I believe in the subconscious. I'm like, it doesn't matter if you believe in it or not, like it's doing its thing. Same with
mm,
how I'm glad we've touched upon that, actually, kind of breaking out of our bubble into the reality of most people. No, that's a luxury. I'm not going to pay for my healthcare. I'm not going to do this. I don't deserve to invest in myself. But the moment
mm.
that we do, so much becomes possible. So I'm glad that we also are getting to speak to like the challenges that do come with doing this work. It does require a lot from us to be brave, to push back against the human need to just fit in. Everyone just wants to fit
Mm.
in. It's if you and me were showing up on social media like, guys, antihistamine, birth control, that's all you have to do. Big mystery. I think we'd be so famous because it's
Yeah.
buying into the current paradigm when for me it's kind of like that sense of internal like, no, but this is what's right. This is what can
Mm.
be true. Feels so much more important, but I think there's so much of a bigger impact there. Because if we really think about it, yeah, we are one of the few people that someone can think of and being like, they actually got me out of PMDD.
Mm.
They got me out. It's done. And it's like, okay, that's done. And now I'm into what really feels true for me now. Basically, good for us.
Yeah, well done. Well done us. Yeah, because I totally agree, and I feel like what I always got from you and what, like, I feel like people will get from me too is that we're doing this work in integrity, so we're not, and I love that. To me, it's so much more supportive, empowering, life-changing, transformational, whatever word you want to use, to be able to change people's lives in the comfort of their own home. It's happening together. It's not like we're m like, I mean, I think we are magical, but I was gonna say it's not like we're magical healers putting something onto someone and then they're
Yeah,
cured. It's this sort of facilitating. It's that process that happens, to collaborative process that happens together, and the benefits of doing that in a space where you're just living your own daily life. Like I feel like I live a pretty I feel like I live an amazing life, but it's pretty simple in loads of ways.
same.
Yeah. I definitely don't jet off to Bali, like, I don't have a lot of those experiences, and there's nothing wrong with that, but I feel like that's where it's even more powerful, because it's like you don't have to have all these things, all these items, all these the shiny glossiness of that to live to come back into balance with your body. It's not a luxury. It's something we all deserve. And what you said before, your body is so wise. Like, I feel like now my awareness has gone so far beyond my menstrual cycle, where I notice when I'm like emotionally eating to fill a hole. I rarely do that, but there's still times, especially at certain points in my cycle, where I'm like, oh, like what, but I'm so much more conscious that I'm doing it. Whereas in the past, I just used to like binge eat and not even be aware that that's what I was doing. And I can feel like pains or like symptoms in my body and know what my body is trying to tell me, that there's, because I feel like things start in the emotional, energetic body, and if they're not
Agreed.
dealt with there, they move into the physical. And that's, so we're seeing the physical like symptoms of everyone's problems or issues, but what's underneath that isn't perhaps physical at all. That's just like the final expression of it. When it's, and because your body has been trying to communicate with you, all of this hormones, menstrual cycle, the whole act of ovulation, and then releasing an egg and bleeding each month, those processes are communication processes. It's your body trying to speak to you, but we don't know how to speak that language. So my work, and I feel like your work too, is all about rediscovering that language by creating presence within the body to go within, to speak to it, to understand what needs to be expressed. And if you go away with that as a toolkit, as a learning, a way of life after working with us, that's huge, because you're literally then able to do this for yourself. Like, you don't have to keep coming back. It's there, like, when you want to work with us. But I've never wanted to design work that is dependent on someone working with me for life, like being in therapy for 8 years or something like that. Like, that's not what it's about for me.
No, I completely agree. I've always thought that as well. We love, but you're going to have to keep going back. And I think that's what's such a gift of this approach to working. I mean, Roseanne, we need to like print what you just said on a t-shirt because I'm a venom. But like you say, reconnecting people to the language of the body. So yeah, you're right. You can be going, all right, cool. Skin's broken out. Liver is feeling overworked because I'm stressed, because I'm angry, and also I ate 3 packets of mini eggs yesterday due to stress. Like it's just troubleshooting. so
Yeah.
efficiently. As you were saying that, I was thinking, when we don't understand things, we shame it. But when we're conscious of it, we've got compassion for it. Like, I'm always
Mm.
getting acne breakouts because I keep eating dairy chocolate because I am stressed. Now, now I don't need to shame it or be like, oh my God, my acne. I'm like, yeah, because every day you consciously buy mini eggs. All right. And I'm like, do you know what? I do feel all right about this now because we've got the awareness. Now we've got choice. Now we can choose. And then, like you were saying, the radical responsibility piece is there. And I think when these topics are initially introduced, especially when we're in that state of crisis, fight or flight, really low self-worth, it's like, we're going
Mm.
to be on the defense. But like you say, when you're welcoming people into a group container where you're there with other people mirroring and reflecting back to you, I also experience this. Don't really trust myself. I feel very volatile. My cycle is scary. I feel scared of myself. Saying that by ourselves, we're probably not going to say it, but you're creating a space for people to be like, yeah, what you said is how I feel, but I wouldn't have been able to put it into words, but you have. And then because
Mm.
the group is there, exactly like you're saying, there's way more room for unfolding and unfurling, and things naturally fall away.
Yeah.
That's the wildest part, isn't it? Like,
Mm.
when I was experiencing PMDD, yes, there were massive breakthroughs, but it wasn't like something snapped or broke off. It naturally just didn't need to show up anymore.
Mhm.
And what I will say is the times when I am abandoning my voice, yeah, week before my period is a feisty time because I've been neglecting the lessons learned. I know now that I need to set boundaries. I need to not be a people pleaser. I know that if
Mm.
I try and be everything for everyone, I'm avoiding doing my own work. Then the PMS is going to show up, albeit not to the extreme. But now I'm like, okay, do you know what? Fair enough, because I needed this. I've been
Mm.
abandoning myself as a protective mechanism. Great. Right. Next month, PMS isn't there. It becomes so much more efficient and so much less scary. But with that, is there anything you feel like we've missed that you would like to be seen or heard within our podcast space today?
I think for anyone who's had any chronic health issue and has gone down that route of going to the doctor, of being told one thing, of being told that it's something they have to live with forever. And I look like I feel like I've experienced the extreme of it with cancer because I was literally told basically like, you've got stage 2 cancer if you don't do these treatments. There's not many good options for you. Like and they like really fear-based stuff. Like I feel like for people to know that okay, that's existing, that fear is there, acknowledging that, and it's really hard to do in those moments when you're being told by someone in authority that these are the best things for you. Take the diagnosis, take whatever they say, but you don't have to identify that way forever, and you don't have to believe that that is going to be your ongoing experience for the rest of your life because it really, really isn't. And just have the curiosity, just have the seed of curiosity to look outside of that and to invite in on other options. Yes, it's scary investing in yourself. Yes, might feel like something no one in your family has ever done before, no one in your friendship group, but are you just slightly intrigued by that other path? And to me, it's all I have a t-shirt that literally says optimist on it, and I love that t-shirt. I love optimism because I'm always like optimism over pessimism, over like negativity, over fear-based thinking will lead you to so many possibilities. And so if you just have that slight calling, that slight interest to go in that direction, there's a wealth of options out there, like what Josephine does, like what I do. Like we're here to create the spaces for this work to happen. And the best thing is that you get to be such a pivotal, essential part of that, that it does have this incredible effect on your life where PMDD is no longer in the picture. I rarely think about it, even though my marketing and my messaging and I'm talking to people about it because I know how awful it was. I totally hear and remember what that was like. And wouldn't you rather trust someone who has been through it like we have? I feel like that's such a big piece of it for me. It's like I would always rather go to someone who I know has been through something and
Me
come out the
too.
other side than someone who's just like looked something up in a medical, a medical dictionary or medical model, done some research and is being told to prescribe certain things for it, because that's, to me, that's just not, yeah, it's just not the way forward. And I'm all here for having difficult conversations, for having challenging conversations, for reframing things, rewriting narratives. I would just encourage people to look at my PMDD program if this is something you've experienced, because I really feel like it can transform like your life and your experience of PMDD so that it's no longer part of the picture.
Mm. And for people who are thinking, okay, I do really want to rewrite this story, you have mentioned that the next cohort of Protecting My Deepest Desires is coming up. Would you like to share what is happening within this?
Yes. So Protecting My Deepest Desires is my signature program, all about naturally rewriting the narrative around PMDD. What I mean by that is that, like I've said, it's a departure from the mainstream. It's all about believing that you can get to the root cause, that you can cure, heal, relieve PMDD. Am I promising that we'll do it in 5 weeks? Who knows? I don't know. It might take longer, but I'm laying the foundations, I'm laying the groundwork with you together in this collaborative space. So it's for 6 people. I have 6 like limited spaces on the course. I last delivered it in November and it was incredible. And I know this time it's going to be like even better because I've put even more into it. So across the 5 weeks, we go through different themes and different topics and different processes that is all about allowing you to bring more presence into your body, to bring more awareness to your cycle. We use things like a menstrual dial and a way of cycle tracking that's much more intuitive and puts you into real connection with like the signs and symptoms that your body is sending you. And through this perspective, you gain a wider lens, let's say, on everything that's going on. But you also are able to identify events and experiences in your life that have been ignored, have been suppressed, that need to come to the surface. So for me, it was things like grief over losing a family member. It was like a fear of abandonment. It's these big emotional topics that need to come into the light to be, and out of the shadows into the light, in order for PMDD to slowly disappear. And yeah, the course is just, it's going to be packed with so much. Like, I'm really bringing all my menstrual cycle coaching, training, information, insights, but really my own model and experience into the program. And in those 5 weeks, it's like, I think you said it, Josephine, when you were part of the last program, it's creating a blueprint with which to journey forward with. It's to, from here, it's like understand PMDD, understand what it's really trying to do. Where has it been trying to protect you? Where can you work with it so that the symptoms start to disappear? And then you have all this stuff that you can then go ahead and integrate, all these learnings that you can take forward in your life, and you have so much more awareness, so much more presence, that yeah, things do magically start to shift because you're doing the work.
Being part of last year's cohort, I look back with, if I think of 2024 highlight moments, is me in Hastings delivering that and working on it. And
Oh.
that week, so much happened around it because I was so focused on like, right, I want to nail this presentation. I really want to do this. I want to show up, speak my truth, deliver this value to Rosannah's course. Because I was in that state of like, right, I'm locked in, I managed to do way more work than I normally would and had a lot of like random, not related, but energetically linked intake calls. Like the day before, I had like
Mm.
5 intro calls. I'm going to be so real, guys. That never happens because you are generating this place of possibility and you were inviting me to show up and give, share the wisdom, share the insight. So, what you're doing is, it's so brilliant on so many levels. Like everyone benefits, and so everyone. Rosannah, where can we find you on Instagram?
I'm at Rosannah Jones on Instagram, so my full name, and then my website is rosannahjones.com, and I'll be sharing all the course details for the PMDD program. over there so you can find them.
Guys, get ready. So we're going to close out our podcast today. But Rosannah, thank you for being here with us. And I'm going to shut down our podcast in 3, 2.
Thank you so much for having me.